I'm happy to join this conversation about what COVID means for environmental politics. Around the world, politicians are scrambling to relaunch economic growth, while media fuel false antagonisms between health and economy, between jobs and environment. What will it take to reorient political economies around equitable well-being and the regeneration of life? Let's start by acknowledging relations between the paths we're traveling and the crises we experience. My president repeats, "We had the best economy in the world, and then we got hit by COVID," as if the disease fell like an asteroid from outer space. It's tempting to respond by portraying this pandemic as messianic reckoning for our unsustainable ways. To be fair, epidemics have been around in the past and will in the future. What is clear is that the speed and scope of this contagion have been driven by accelerated circulation of global economies, while encroachment on habitats has encouraged coronavirus, as well as HIV, Ebola, SARS, MERS, to jump from other animals to humans. So I respond to COVID with two radical changes at the heart of politics. One, replace the drive for growth with attention to care for humans and other natures. Second, reject gendered practices adapted to facilitate economic expansion and embrace those supporting regeneration of life. Most nations have enough resources to cover public health and basic needs during crises and beyond. Yet, because current economies are organized around constant circulation, any decline in market activity threatens collapse, unemployment, and impoverishment. It doesn't have to be this way. To be more resilient to future crises, health, climate, financial, political, we can build systems that allow us to scale back market production without sacrificing livelihoods or lives. One approach is degrowth, which entails voluntarily slowing down global use of material and energy and reorienting values, institutions, and worldviews around equitable and pleasurable well-being. Our new book, The Case for Growth, advances these goals on multiple fronts: values, policies, design, practices, social movements. We outline 5 policy practices: Green New Deals, reduced working hours, universal basic income, support of community economies, reorganization of public finance. Without deep social change, however, even the best policies will fail. That means forging ethnic systems that do not racialize certain humans as inferior, justifying appropriation of their labor and resources. Gender systems that do not extol production as marker of superior masculinity, nor relegate care and reproduction to inferior realms of femininity. It also means recognizing intersections among these, such as subordinate masculinities that drive millions of poor, non-white men to sell their labor in exploitative conditions harmful and risky to their bodies and environments. In every society, provisioning and care, as well as vulnerabilities to harm, are organized through social systems. While recently reviewing 35 articles on gender and COVID, I was happy to see attention to this interface, but disappointed to find almost nothing about men or LGBTQ. Transformations we seek require understanding integral systems. One example is gender-based violence. It's often observed that women suffer disproportionate domestic violence, which seems to have increased during the pandemic. What if we also consider gender-based violence against men? In the Americas, the World Health Organization reports that men are the victims of nearly 90% of homicides, 70% of suicides, and 95% of occupational deaths. This info could motivate women and men to forge roles and relations that are healthier for themselves, for others, and for other nature. Turns out that COVID impacts are highly gendered as well, leading to about twice as many deaths for men as for women, particularly among poor and non-white men. Media repeatedly emphasize vulnerability of women working in healthcare, but what about men who perform essential jobs? Sanitation workers, meat packers, food harvesters, truck and bus drivers are just as essential to public health and these were already among the most dangerous and deadly occupations before adding exposure to COVID. Lives of men on average are shorter than those of women in every country, thanks to lifestyle, diet, attitudes to healthcare, biology, occupations, and risk-taking. All are relevant for COVID and for reshaping economies and environments post-COVID. Studies found men up to twice as likely to go without masks and to break quarantine. Is it helpful to blame men for getting sick? We have learned compassion for women whose conditions undermine the confidence, financial skills, initiative necessary to make dignified lives for themselves. Why not feel compassion for boys and men whose expectations push them to demonstrate virility by taking risks, by exercising and enduring violence? Cultural politics make heteronormative nuclear households with men breadwinners seem natural and universal since prehistory to the supersonic future. Many public health messages assume that everyone lives in this mode. Stay at home with your family. Women are burdened with more housework than their husbands. But in fact, this gender mode of production is quite recent historical phenomenon, very far from statistically dominant. In the US, only 20% of households consist of nuclear families, which you'd never expect from the COVID messages we get. Many people don't even live in households. Care centers tend to house more women because they live longer, but men make up large majorities in jails, prisons, migrant work camps, homeless shelters, immigration detention centers, military barracks, all hotspots for contagion. The portrayal of one model limits public health and environmental strategies because it does not reflect empirical realities. It also reinforces normative messages that demean and undermine plural lifeways. A single person living alone makes up 27% of US households and Canadian households, 40% of Swedish households. Politics need to support existing arrangements for care and reproduction and new innovations provoked by challenges like COVID, such as virtual queer dance parties. COVID realities strengthen the case for expanding gender analysis beyond women's needs, to pay attention to all identities and relations relevant for pandemic response and for transformation towards healthier worlds. Gender systems operate to sustain, reproduce, and adapt all human groups. However, with the expansion of colonial capitalism, gender was co-opted to facilitate exploitation and profit, particularly through hierarchical distinction of production over reproduction. Liberal feminist efforts to empower women by moving them into productive roles have certainly enlarged economies, but not brought about transformations we seek towards more caring and regenerative worlds. Environmental scholarship and politics require more integral approaches that build towards the regeneration of life rather than generation of market value. In conclusion, the pandemic has laid bare inadequacies and inequalities in current systems and provoked a surge of collaborative, caring initiatives. Neither is sufficient to change the arc of current politics. Bitter struggles have already arisen over which paths to pursue through and after this pandemic. Powerful actors are pushing to reconstitute status quo that enabled the crisis in the first place. There's danger that abilities to ally in resistance will be undermined by politics of fear, surveillance, xenophobia, blame, as well as isolation that constrains organizing and solidarity. Transformative responses will require alliances among diverse perspectives and movements. Our immediate case for including feminist degrowth in this allied front is that its fundamental practices, modest living and cooperation, caring and convivial sharing, building solidarity communities, and regenerating natural environments are desirable in and of themselves. Even with no political victory in sight, people are already exercising and embodying caring degrowth worlds. Thank you.